because they're fully realized, when they come back into flesh, it is like divinity descending into flesh. It's not an ego. It's not a personality. It is really a unique expression of God, but a full expression of God in that being. So according to Yogananda, all of the major world religions were started by avatars, that Buddha was an avatar, that Krishna was an avatar, that even he, indirectly referring to himself, admitted that he would have had to have been an avatar to come into a work of such importance. But there are many, many saints. There are many, many great teachers who are not avatars. They don't necessarily have the complete level of realization. They don't have the power that these avatars do have, but they can do wonderful things. They can awaken us in many ways, draw us to the path in deeper ways. So it's a rich world of help out there that the divine is sending us, from friends who are interested in spirituality, who get us interested, to books we read by people who have had spiritual experiences, to near-death experiencers, on up. But the pinnacle of that up is the avatar. And Jesus was one, Yogananda was one, Buddha was one, and there are others. But it's a very rare and exalted state.
To a Broaderlands podcast. The opinions expressed on Broaderlands podcast are those of the guest speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of the host or Broaderlands podcast. Joseph, welcome to Broaderlands podcast. What an honor to have you on.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
I want to thank Sandy for connecting us. And you're a founding member of Ananda, which I find very interesting because that brings me back to the very beginning of my spiritual journey, my spiritual path after I had my awakening. So I'm very grateful to have you on. It's an honor and a privilege. Like I was sharing before, I walked into not knowing anything about spirituality, and I find Ananda fellowship, and I spent a lot of time at Lake Shrine by myself, just sitting there, because I couldn't speak to anybody about this stuff. So it's an honor to have you on.
Well, thank you.
Maybe if you don't mind, maybe you could share a little bit about your journey with Ananda and about Swami Kriyananda and Paramahansa Yogananda, if you don't mind. And I would love to ask you about your upbringing and how you got into, physics and spirituality, because I always say science without spirituality is incomplete, and spirituality without science is ignorance.
Yes. Well, my upbringing didn't really bring in any of the spirituality that I later discovered and embraced as the central part of my life. But it definitely was part of what drew me into physics and into science in general, because my family was very, mental, rational, material, very intelligent. All my brothers, sisters, father, mother. And their focus, their kind of lingua franca about what is real, what isn't real, was all centered around science. I used to joke that at the dinner table, when there was some kind of conversation, it was good to have references ready to back up what you had to say. That my father in particular was a stickler for making sure that anything we did discuss was grounded in discovery and legitimate science. So it was good training for me, and I loved science, still love science today. But when I was in college, and this is a long time ago, I was in college starting in 1971 and was at college for 2 or 3 years. And in that time, I had a number of basically life-changing hallucinogenic experiences. And it coincided with having an initial roommate who was into Paramahansa Yogananda, and they all kind of mixed together and put me really firmly on the path of self-realization, the path of learning more about how to experience my higher self, my higher potential, to connect to spirit, to God. And then that led pretty much directly, pretty soon, by the time I was in my junior year of college, I discovered Ananda. Now, Ananda was started by Swami Kriyananda, who was a direct disciple of Paramahansa Yogananda. And he had started a community in around 1970 in the foothills of the Sierras outside of Sacramento. And when I came on the scene, so to speak, in 1975, the community was fairly well established, but there were about 100 people, including children. So that's when I joined and started contributing to, the growth and expansion of Ananda. And now we have communities and centers literally all over the world. We have like 160 meditation groups, something like that, in 120 plus countries. So it has really exploded in the 50 years roughly I've been connected to it, because it's very grassrootsy. We like people to be involved and get involved once they're involved, and to participate in everything and help grow everything. We're not evangelical, but we do offer a lot of classes, etc. So it's a kind of work that people can dive into and become a part of very quickly. So it's been a pleasure for me to be a part of it and to grow with it and to help it grow. Until today, I'm still living in Ananda Village, where I started in 1975. And I think this coming June will be my 50th anniversary of being in the community.
Well, that's awesome. And you have Ananda villages all over the place. I remember looking into Ananda Village a little bit, and I was like, man, I want to move there. Could you share a little bit about Ananda villages, if you don't mind?
Well, there are communities like Ananda Village that have also grown in Seattle, in Portland, in Sacramento, outside of our area, in San Francisco. And then there are ones that have grown in India and in Italy, as well as centers and meditation groups. They sort of all are just variations on a theme. If you're a center, you don't necessarily have residents. If you're a residential community, you have the same kind of center activities that the centers have, et cetera. So they are kind of a continuum of the same idea, even with meditation groups. But our communities are particularly involving, because you can live in the context of the community and know other people for whom that is their main purpose in life, their main focus, whether they have their job within the community or job outside the community. The life within the community is a central focus. And so you get a lot of reinforcement, you get a lot of friends who love to do what you love to do. And it's a great way to live. I highly recommend it for anybody who wants to dive deep into anything. But if you're drawn to Yogananda's teachings, it is a very satisfying way to incorporate them in your life, integrate them into your life, interact with others who have done the same. And it gives a lot of power to your own search, basically, your own process of trying to attain self-realization.
Yeah, thank you. And I shared this with Neil Donald Walsh when I interviewed him, and because he had an impact in my life as well. Because I had after my awakening, I had a lot of mysticism just come to me. It's kind of like that Rumi quote, "What you're seeking is seeking you." and stuff. I mean, so much that I couldn't comprehend it, but I was pointed to certain place to look at certain things, and I really felt guided. And Yogananda was my number one guide, I would say, for my first several years. But you know, everyone's going to church, and I'm looking into some other paths, and that's kind of odd, So I was wondering, like, I kept asking, am I on the right path? Am I doing something wrong? Because that fear religion puts you in at times.
Uh-huh.
I found a book. It was in Target, and it wasn't even a book. It was a DVD at the time. And it was like everything got a little darker, and this DVD staring at me, it felt like. And it was
Hmm.
Conversations with God. So I started to read Conversations with God. And when I opened up the Revelations of Christ by Swami Kriyananda, writing about the teachings of Yogananda, along with his insights, I seen Neil Donald Walsh wrote something in the beginning of the book about so I felt like, okay, I am on the right path, because
Okay.
this ain't a coincidence.
Yeah,
So it was just pretty.
we get sent those kind of signs. We get
Yeah.
directed to those signs that reassure and guide.
Yeah, so it felt pretty cool. And everywhere I went, I would hear about Yogananda. I'm like, dang, who's this Yogananda guy? I remember going to a Unity church. I heard someone talk about a Unity church. I went to a Unity church for the first time, and there's a guest minister. And the guest minister, he starts sharing about Paramahansa Yogananda.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, whoa, everywhere I go, I hear this Yogananda guy. What's going on? And I finally realized that, looking at the lineup, he was really like speaking to me in spirit, I felt. And I've always felt like
Yogananda
I
has
lived in India.
been very, very influential a bit in the kind of awakening spiritual movement within America. I mean, he was
Mm.
sent to America by his teacher for that purpose, but he's had an extraordinary influence. There was a book written by Phil Goldberg. It's called
Mm-hmm.
American Veda. And he was basically setting out to kind of trace the evolution, the development of spiritual teachings in America. And he interviewed a lot of contemporary spiritual teachers like um, Donald Walsh and many others. And what he said was the common, most referenced book by all of those contemporary spiritual teachers, the book that was most key to them themselves getting their feet on the spiritual path, was the Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. So not only are people like myself following Yogananda's teachings really directly, he influenced the teachers whose teachings are everywhere in the kind of new age spiritual direction of America.
Who are some of the like celebrities at the time that he's influenced? I know he's influenced the Beatles. I think Elvis that come to mind.
Yes. So with the Beatles, it was more George Harrison than all of the Beatles, but George Harrison was deeply influenced by um, the teachers of this path. But by that time, Yogananda had passed. So George Harrison's connection was to the original work that Yogananda started, Self-Realization Fellowship. But everywhere that George Harrison went, he said he took a stack of the autobiography, the book, with him. And he said whenever he saw somebody who needed regrooving, he'd give him that book. He used to wear a pin that was Babaji, picture of
Mm.
Babaji, which was, from the autobiography, the teacher of the whole line of gurus that ended up with Yogananda. And many people know this, but it's always interesting for those who have not ever noticed it. But the cover of Sgt. Pepper's, which is probably the Beatles' best known album, on the cover you will find all the teachers from this line: Babaji, Lahiri Mahashai, Sri Yukteswar, and Paramahansa Yogananda. So again, they're sort of spreading that consciousness through all sorts of channels. But Yogananda did. He influenced a number of people who were Amalita Galakurchi, who was a famous opera singer, different movie stars. because he had his headquarters in LA, in Hollywood in particular, he made connections with many of those celebrities. So, as you mentioned, Elvis Presley got involved. He actually wanted to become a monk in SRF, and Diamata, who was alive at the time, said, I think it would be better, Elvis, for you to just keep going in the direction you're going. Sort of always makes me chuckle a little bit to imagine Elvis Presley as a monk within a monastery. But his heart was huge. If you read about Elvis Presley, his big heart, loved people, loved to sing, but he also loved to sing gospel. He loved to sing anything that awakened that sort of heart connection to the divine. So Yogananda, has probably thousands of little trails of influence coming off from his life, particularly in America, but all over the world.
Yeah, you're right. And Sri Dayamata, I love her. I think she was just a beautiful soul as well. I mean, I always connect her teaching, her early childhood similar to Thich Nhat Hanh, the Zen master, because I think at that early age they knew they were gonna, they wanted to they were gonna be a spiritual leader, or I don't know, like Thich Nhat Hanh, for an example, he knew at 6 years old when he seen the Buddha's picture that he wanted to be a Buddhist monk.
Right.
I think their higher self knew,
Right.
Maybe not their conscious mind, but deep down in their soul, they knew.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
so I find,
Kriyananda, who you've already mentioned, who started the Ananda movement, came to Yogananda in 1948, and he was fresh out of college. But through his youth, he had many spiritual experiences that kept drawing him to something more, something higher, something deeper. And when he read the autobiography of a yogi in 1948, he got on a bus 4 days later and drove across the country by bus to Los Angeles, found his way to Yogananda, and was accepted, which was very unusual at the time, accepted as a disciple that day, and ushered into the monastery, which he was in for a number of years until the 1960. I'm surprised I can't remember, but he was in the monastery for quite a long time before he went off and got the Ananda started.
yeah, I'm grateful for him. When I remember when I seen him, I felt this like glowing, like this aura around him when I got to see him, and his teachings, your guys' teachings and movement. It gave me no chance to be conditioned a certain way. I became, my heart was open to the teachings, like the rays of one light, explains it all. Or, reading the revelations of Christ. It was hard for me to read in the beginning, but I learned how to read. And it just my heart opened to that universal consciousness of the mystics, I like to say. So I'm truly grateful.
And it's interesting you bring that up because when Yogananda was sent to the West by his teacher, he was told that his overarching purpose in going to the West was to show the unity between Christianity and yoga, or between the original teachings of Jesus and the original teachings of Krishna. And so a lot of his teaching in public and a lot of the books that he wrote focused on showing how the two seemingly very different expressions that have spawned, religions in which maybe several billion people in the world are members, but he was able to show how the original realizations of Christ and the original realizations of Krishna came from the source, same truth, experiential truth in either case. So what I love about that is, for many people who had a Christian background today and had, a real love of it from typically their childhood, who then later, as adults, began to have doubts about Christianity because the kind of current theology of Christianity, their story, is a hard one to accept in the context of there being all these other religions, in the context of there being science, which seems to counter what the typical story is. But many people who ran into that experience of loving Christianity but not being able to embrace it were able to kind of rekindle their love for it through the teachings of Yogananda, because his teachings included both.
You know what I find very interesting about that is Yogananda died, he passed away, he left his body in 1952, right?
Yeah.
And the Gospel of Thomas was found in 1945. I don't know when it got translated, but I'm sure it took a while to get translated. And what Yogananda was teaching is pretty much confirmed, because bringing back the original teachings of Christ, I know there was where the light was a little dim in Christianity, and he felt like he wanted to help brighten that light and bringing back the original teachings. And correct me if I'm wrong, but when you read the Gospel of Thomas, it's pretty much what Yogananda was saying without reading the Gospel of Thomas, because I don't think it was translated. He didn't get his hands on that. And it's self-realization. That's what I get out of the Gospel of Thomas. Which I find really interesting.
And today most religions tend to go through this evolution of having a fully realized founder like Buddha or Krishna or Christ. But then over the centuries, even the millennia, the religion takes on this kind of outer form. And the outer form often heads more towards rituals and purifications and going to church and outer behavior, and begins to lose the original inner awakening that was taught by those teachers, and that the real purpose of religion is for us to awaken ourselves, and that the outer trappings of religion are just to help that inner awakening. But that tends to get lost over time.
Man, I feel like crying right now, because I remember there was a moment at Lake Shrine where I'm standing right there after the second gift shop, and I'm right there by what is that tower, that little tower? It's been some years that I've been there.
The windmill?
Yeah, the windmill. That little spot where you can walk down right by the water and look at every. Well, he told me, and when I say he told me, it's right here, the voice. He said, "Don't focus on my self-realization. Learn from it, but focus on your own."
Mm-hmm.
So when you said that, I'm like, "Whoa, that's powerful," because I remember that like vivid when that happened. I spent a lot of time by myself there. It's just powerful moment. And yeah, you're right. A lot of the religions, the mystics and the great masters, their teachings get distorted. Got a little teary-eyed because I remember that like it was yesterday. That when that happened. So pretty interesting. Thank you. How would you define self-realization?
Well, I think self-realization mainly needs to be experienced, but defining can help inspire you and point you in the direction of pursuing it yourself. So the way I would inspire it is the self-realization is the process of rediscovering your infinite spiritual nature. And that along the way, you have the help of spiritual teachers like Yogananda, like Christ. But ultimately, the highest experience is not just being a disciple of a great master, but becoming a great master yourself to achieve that final amazing oneness with spirit. That is where the really elevated masters are coming from when they teach.
And Kriyananda says that too in the Revelations of Christ. And it's been years since I read the book and even opened it. And he said, being a good Christian is one thing, but really being Christ-like is another. And I'm paraphrasing. It was
Right.
important to become Christ-like.
Right. And that is what kind of got lost in the shuffle over time, perhaps many times, as Christianity kind of hardened into its current shape. But that's true of all religions, that kind of lose sight of the fact that we are all potentially Christ-like masters. That is our destiny. We are equal. Even Christ said in his life, those things that I do today, you will do even greater things in the time to come. He was not putting himself up as the only master, but that he was there to teach everyone to become masters themselves.
I'm getting teary-eyed because you bring me back to when I had my awakening, and I'm just like, I haven't really looked at this since then. So it's just pretty cool. It's really heart-touching. It touched my heart, all these teachings. So I really am grateful to have you on. And you talk about there are two selves or two bodies. What is the self?
So the self, according to Yogananda's teachings, and you can see it echoed in all the traditions of what I call experiential spirituality. So not necessarily religions, but the traditions where you're actually meditating or doing things for the purpose of experiencing your own self directly. All of them tend to define the self as essentially a spark of the divine, a part of the divine, and equal to the divine in a way. It's easy to get carried away with the idea that, we are godlike, because then we start thinking that we're gods, right? And yes, we are, but we're not independent entities. We're one with God, and in that oneness, we become godlike. So that is the real self. But in the situation we find ourselves in now, we're not identifying with that infinite. We're not experiencing that infinite consciousness. We're instead experiencing a much smaller, less expanded state of awareness, which centers on the physical body and what the senses can tell us. So it's very easy for anyone and everyone to, in terms of what they really know, really experience, to think of themselves as just physical bodies. And that when they're told that they are infinite sons and daughters of God, it's a little hard to believe, because from day to day, moment to moment, we tend to be more aware of the physical body. But what the, again, teachings of universal spirituality tend to tell us is that the physical body is the material body, but we also have an energy body and a more subtle thought body, if you will, and that they're all present all of the time, just as our infinite spiritual self is always present. If it weren't, the body couldn't be here. There would be nothing to animate the body. There would be no life force. There would be no energy in motion, creating that body and your energy body and even your thought body. So your spirit is always there, but it's clothed. That's the way Yogananda described it. It's clothed in these three other bodies at this time in your awareness, certainly in my awareness. And that the process of self-realization is the process of gaining greater and greater awareness of the subtler aspects of yourself. so that you begin to really know, not just intellectually, but experientially, that you are also the possessor of a pure energy body, and that pure energy body is the source of your life force. It's the source of your thoughts, your emotions, and that without your energy body, your physical body would simply disappear. That your energy body is creating and manifesting and maintaining the physical body like a hologram and a holographic projection. So your energy body is the hologram, and your physical body is the holographic projection. But then we have this yet more subtle body, which I've referred to as your thought body. Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's teacher, referred to it as the causal body, because the thoughts that it is made up of cause the creation of your energy body and your physical body. So just as your energy body creates and maintains your physical body, your thought body, your causal body shapes and creates your energy body. So the process of self-realization is the process of kind of going backwards through that process of creation and letting go of the physical body as the only expression of yourself, embracing the energy body as a more subtle expression of yourself, embracing the thought body as the most subtle expression of your embodied self, until finally you can have your awareness expand beyond even that, and you realize your oneness with God.
So when Jesus says, "Ye are gods," how would you interpret that?
Well, I think he meant it literally. I mean, he was trying to awaken in people the awareness that they are so much more than physical bodies or energy body or their thoughts or their feelings or their memories, that they are pure spirit. They are gods. And as such, they have the powers of God. So with great masters, you often have the stories of great masters creating miracles, raising people from the dead, walking on water, changing water into wine, and so many more from all the different traditions and religions in the world. But what all of them say is self-realization, returning to that awareness of who you truly are, is not so you can work miracles. It's the masters work miracles to get your attention. And Jesus even said, lest they see signs and wonders, they will not believe. So it's an attention-grabbing thing that is often used for. It's also a compassionate expression of the divine masters. Many of their miracles are healing miracles, where they help people in deep need of healing. But the real purpose of us becoming an awakening to the fact that we are spiritual masters is not to work miracles, but to become aware of who and what we really are. And then whatever God wants to do with us and through us is really up to God.
I love that. And you talk a lot about near-death experiences, and a lot of these people that have near-death experiences describe a reality beyond this physical world. What got you fascinated with NDEs? I've had a shared death experience. I've had outer body experiences. Shared death experience when my father passed away. So I can relate a little bit with the near-death experiences. And I felt like I had a life review here when I did the 12 steps. And I could share that later. But how do you interpret these experiences with the physics of God?
Well, I think that near-death experiencers are a great resource for understanding these fundamental aspects of who and what we really are. Most near-death experiencers don't have as lofty an experience as we hear from spiritual masters, because the spiritual masters are able to go, beyond the heavens even. But the fact that the near-death experiencers have experienced the heavens, that they've gone that far, if you will, on the journey back to spirit, is very empowering, I think, when you read their recounting of their experience, one after the other. You begin to appreciate how similar they are. They're always unique because every individual is unique and they have unique experiences. But then they also have this sort of shared theme of experiencing a body that is non-material. They are experiencing their energy body, and they realize that it behaves in a way that their physical body can't. It's more mutable. It is more full of energy. It's purely healthy as long as they're in that astral realm. And they also discover, more important than anything else, is that they are an expression of spirit, that they often feel this transformative love from God. One, I can't remember who wrote it, but said, I just experienced myself filling and filling and filling and filling with love beyond anything I had ever experienced before. So for the near-death experiencers, the experience is often completely life-changing. But even if you are just a reader of those stories, it affirms and confirms the higher experience that spiritual teachers like Yogananda and Christ and Buddha are telling us are true. They get that underlining, that foundation from this more recent experience of people. So I found it just very inspirational just to read book after book after book and understand, what awaits in a way for most of us. Most of us are not going to get all the way to the infinite in this single lifetime. I wish I could say that was true, but I don't believe it's true. That's why there is reincarnation. We have to keep coming back to school until we pass all the lessons that we need to learn and master. But eventually we will. But for most of us, our next step is going to be going into the astral, going into our energy bodies and experiencing that.
What I find interesting, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What I find interesting is when people talk about these near-death experiences, even in this other realm, the non-physical realm, they're explaining how their thoughts or their beliefs shape their reality on the other side or in a different dimension.
Because that's where they originate. Because we're surrounded by a culture, a worldwide culture that insists all of our experiences must arise from the physical body and brain, we begin to believe that is the only place they could arise from. So when near-death experiencers have these experiences, they clearly don't have physical bodies anymore. And yet they have the same memories. They have the same thought processes. They have some of the same experience of feeling. They have a more healthy and freer form, but that form echoes what they look like in their physical body. So they're able to understand that the physical body is really just as Yogananda used to describe it, an overcoat. That the physical body is there's nothing in the physical body that creates and causes all these things like thought, feeling, and life force that we tend to relate to as being us, none of them come from the physical body. They all actually create the physical body. But when the physical body dies, we still have it all. We still have all those abilities that we mistakenly think the physical body is creating.
Yeah, thank you. Through a spiritual lens and a scientific point of view, how powerful is our mind? Do we have the ability to heal from certain illnesses and diseases with the power of that's within us?
Yes. I mean, not only do we have the power to heal, we are creating the bodies that we have from our minds now. So your degree of health you have now is a perfect reflection of what you deeply believe your state of health is. And some of my favorite stories that confirm this are from the world of multiple personality disorder sufferers. So most people know today, it's kind of made its way through popular culture, that there are people who have more personalities sharing one body, and that they kind of move in and out of these personalities with no apparent rhyme or reason when and why, but they find themselves moving from one personality to another. Interestingly enough, whenever they're in one personality, they have absolutely no memory of having been in any other personalities. And they are completely convinced that that personality is who they are and who they always will be. What's less known about multiple personality disorder is that not only do the personalities change, but when a new personality comes in, it brings with it physiological change. So there are some personalities that have moles that disappear when other personalities come in. Same with scars. There was a personality in a male body who thought he was a drug addict. And whenever his personality came into the body, he had needle tracks on his arm.
Wow.
And those needle tracks would disappear. Wow. Some personalities even have different colored irises, different eye color, because they deeply believe that they have blue eyes, or they deeply believe that they have green eyes, whatever it is, from one personality to another. But hands down, to me, the most amazing story from multiple personality sufferers is of a woman, German woman, who had 10 personalities. And when she first came to her therapist seeking help, she was completely blind and had been since birth. But as she went through therapy, 9 out of 10 of her personalities began to be able to see to varying degrees while that personality was present. But one of them, let's call it personality number 1, never did regain any ability to see. So that's pretty extraordinary right there. But think about how fast that happens. So it only takes seconds to minutes for one personality to come in. And by the time that personality comes in the case of this woman who had been blind, that personality could suddenly see. And these were not, it's easy to think, well, they're fooling themselves into thinking. She must have been actually able to see, but for some sort of, hysterical reason, couldn't bring herself to see. But in fact, when that personality that is blind is tested with what's called visual evoked potentials, basically in her case, shining a really bright light in her eyes when that happens and she's wearing a EKG sensor net, there is absolutely no reaction from any neuron in her brain. This is impossible to fake. This light shining in open eyes, bright light, does in fact cause a reaction in all her other personalities in the brain while her other personalities are in place. So what this tells us is what we believe about ourselves is not just sort of shaping our physical body and health. It is absolutely shaping our physical body and health. And if we can change those beliefs, which is not easy, but if we can change those beliefs, we can instantaneously change our physical body.
Kind of reminds me of that story of Jesus, and I don't remember the story by heart, but where a lady touches his garment and he says it's by your faith that you're healed. Is that like the placebo effect, the power of the mind?
Well, whenever you're talking about being healed or an advanced spiritual person helping heal someone, there's always two sides to that. So the one side, which let's say is the woman's side in this story, is that she had to be completely receptive to the idea that this teacher, Jesus, could heal her. So without that receptivity, without that level of belief, she couldn't have been healed by anyone. But in that particular story, it also took the actual high healing power of Jesus to connect with her, two sides coming together and allowing the current to flow, so to speak, that healed her body. But you don't need to have a master present for your own healing powers to be effective. You need the absolute conviction. You need the absolute belief. And that, again, that's not necessarily easy, but I stress it because it's a fundamental power we all have. And right now we're all using it to create what we look like now. We just don't realize it. But if we could, and people sometimes do, through various causes, have a real shift in what they believe about themselves, it is instantly reflected in their physical body. Whether that means overcoming cancer, whether that means looking different, whether that means just greater vitality and good health. All of those things happen in concert with, and exactly in concert with, our deepest convictions.
Yeah, thank you. I come from the 12-step community, and I started to see certain things because it's a beautiful movement. There's a lot of spirituality in there. Like there's a saying that we have entered the world of the spirit if you do a certain section of the book, do the writing, the work, and all that inner work. But there's a lot of limiting beliefs as well. There's a belief that we're never cured. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. And it becomes the identity. Like I choose not to say I'm an alcoholic, for an example, because I think that's not healthy for me. Especially when I realized, read the teachings of Bruce Lipton as well, gave me that confirmation. I had two experiences like Neil Donald Walsh. The other one was after a meditation. I'm praying and meditating about some answers because I started seeing some of the limiting beliefs that I feel was not healthy for me to continue to have. So I got confirmation through Joe Dispenza one day after a prayer meditation. A day or two later, this other book's looking at me like similar to Neil Donald Walsh. It only happened twice like that, and that was the second time. And I got a lot of confirmation off of his teachings that no, you're not weird, you're not wrong. If you're kind of challenging the group think in a loving and a healthy way, it's just not healthy to some of these customs are not healthy anymore. Yeah, how powerful are limiting beliefs or believing something's always wrong with you?
Well, very. I mean, I would say they're almost absolute. That you really, if you embark on self-improvement and self-change, and yet deeply believe you can't change or improve, you're really not going to make any headway. So I think as a starting point, we need to convince ourselves that that is a possibility. Now, I appreciate and value what the 12-step process is all about. And I think that there is a level of truth to that notion that you're always an alcoholic or you're always an addict, whatever it is, because your brain does create neural circuitry to support your behavior. And that neural circuitry can stay in your brain for the rest of your life. So I think the truth there is that you would be able to quickly fall back into the habit of addiction and alcohol if you aren't firmly moving in another direction. So I think that's a good cautionary tale in it, and it recognizes the influence that the brain has on our behavior. But I also totally agree with you that, dwelling on that rather than dwelling on I'm an infinite being with infinite potential would be to your detriment. So, like all things in our world, until we're fully aware, fully realized, we're a mix of tendencies.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it has a place in the very beginning, but having multiple years, having 30 years or 15 years or 20 years, and you're still in the newcomer state of mind, thinking something's always wrong with you, I think there's something to look at after those many years.
I agree with you.
Yeah. The power of stillness, I would love for you to touch on before we have to go. Kriya Yoga and in the power of inner stillness. I love that saying, thank God for neuroplasticity. And you say in your book, The Physics of God, how we can rewire our brain through meditation.
Yes. Yeah, and just as I was talking about the neural circuits that formed to support addiction, new neural circuits can form to support anything that we choose to do. The brain is extremely plastic in that it's extremely changeable. So it only takes a handful of repetitions of any new thing, whether it's a new thought, new feeling, new song, new physical ability. Your brain will start forming a circuit that supports it so it becomes easier for you. Playing a musical instrument is always a good example, because if you first pick up a guitar and you've never played a guitar or any other instrument before, it takes a lot of focus and concentration to get, your finger to pluck the string and your other finger to hold down a string and then move and pluck and move and pluck. And you have to play the most basic kind of music in order to learn. But what you're learning is not so much that song, because in a way, you've already learned that song the moment you play it the first time. But what you're really doing is you're creating neural circuitry that makes those finger transitions more automatic. And that the more you practice, the more neural circuits you form, and the more automatic all of those things become. The more you concentrate, the faster you build the circuits as well. So this is just true in anything, whether it's playing video games, skateboarding, the kind of subjects you like to talk about. Your brain just says, oh, okay, this is what you're into now, so we're going to support it. Next time you want to do it, it's going to be easier for you to do it. So this also works to help us meditate. And not only does meditation form the neural circuitry that helps us sit still, which is a real key to meditating, it also forms the circuits that tend to draw energy from other distracting things that we're doing. They become more and more central to who we are. They're more and more magnetic. More of our neural energy flows to those circuits automatically than to the other circuits that might distract us. So over time, we'll sit still with much more ease and for much longer periods of time because the brain is just not letting us move. The brain just isn't moving all our arms and legs and making us, fidget in our chair. And similarly, the brain is stimulating our connection to higher consciousness. And it is drawing energy away from anything that we might want to be thinking about or feeling that is less elevated, less lofty, less helpful to take us in. So we build circuits. And when we do that for a while, not only does meditation become easier and what we experience in meditation become richer and more wonderful, it also draws the energy out of all the circuits that are in competition with it. And we become more focused as a being. That ability becomes more central to us than everything else that we do. So it's transformative. Once we learn to sit and go within, then we experience spirit automatically. We don't have to create spirit. We are spirit. We just need to stop thinking about everything but spirit, right? We need to stop getting in the way of our own knowing. And what's most getting in the way of our own knowing is physical movement and mental restlessness and strong emotions that, are reactive emotions to what's happening in our life. Those are no small things to overcome, but the way to overcome them is to build this inner practice and give it power, and then it becomes transformative everywhere in our life.
Thank you. When the eye is single, the whole body is full of light.
Right.
You brought me to so many early memories in my spiritual awakening with Ananda, and one thing I remember is the power of chanting Om. I'd love for you to touch on the symbol Om that's pretty popular in the West nowadays, but I remember feeling like this cosmic vibration. Om Christ, Amen. Om Christ, Om. I just remember you feel this in your whole body, your whole being, this vibration. Can you touch on the power of Om, if you don't mind?
Well, Yogananda said that Om, which is spelled various ways, O-M and A-U-M, is a central tenet of the yoga teachings, and that it is what he called the sole causative force of the universe. But he also said that it appears in other religions with other names, one of which is the Amen, which is where the whole tradition of saying Amen at the end of services in the Christian tradition came from. And the Amen is the word. The word, as it's quoted in John, is the word was with God, and the word was God. That it is this incredible power. It was also called the comforter, that when you feel it, particularly when you hear it and feel it vibrating through your whole being, like it's making you resonate with a tone, it's deeply comforting. It's deeply reassuring. It's deeply soothing, because it is an expression, very powerful expression of God. So chanting Om is a wonderful thing to do, particularly if you use it to awaken the experience of Om within yourself. So often chanting Om is something, again, that's done at the end of something, and then everybody stands up, starts talking or going away. Better to chant Om and start to feel that power reverberating through your being, because it is consciousness with a particular job. It's a facet of God that has a particular purpose. And when you feel it, you're feeling God.
Thank you. How do you look at all the masters? I know in India they use the term avatars, and I appreciate that term and that understanding that Yogananda taught me. But a lot of times in the West, growing up, Jesus is the only way. But when I really started to see how the Swamis, and I got yelled at in a religious class in Arizona here, not a couple years ago, because I said the Swamis seem like they know Jesus better than most pastors.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean that
I can see why that got you in trouble.
It slipped out. I didn't mean it in a negative way, but it's
right.
Being realistic. I really feel the Swamis, like Yogananda. I mean, try reading. When I first had my awakening, I would spend a lot of time trying to read the Second Coming of Christ. And it was hard. It was a hard read, especially when you're new to all this. But as the years went by, things started to make more sense. And he just opened expanded my consciousness in so many ways through his teachings. So I'm truly grateful. How do you look at the avatars along with Jesus? I think it's just a universal consciousness they all tapped into.
Well, the avatar concept, as it's coming from Vedic teachings, yogic teachings, is an expression of what they literally translates to the descent of divinity into flesh. What Yogananda went on to explain in more detail is that once any one of us has gone back through this journey from the physical to the energetic to the causal, and finally full self-realization, full liberation in oneness with God, one of us could be asked by the divine to become a particularly significant spiritual teacher, because they're fully realized when they come back into flesh, it is like divinity descending into flesh. It's not an ego, it's not a personality. It is really a unique expression of God, but a full expression of God in that being. So according to Yogananda, all of the major world religions were started by avatars, that Buddha was an avatar, that Krishna was an avatar, that even he, indirectly referring to himself, admitted that he would have had to have been an avatar to come into a work of such importance. But there are many, many saints. There are many, many great teachers who are not avatars. And they don't necessarily have the complete level of realization. They don't have the power that these avatars do have, but they can do wonderful things. They can awaken us in many ways, draw us to the path in deeper ways. So it's a rich world of help out there that the divine is sending us, from friends who are interested in spirituality, who get us interested, to books we read by people who have had spiritual experiences, to near-death experiencers, on up. But the pinnacle of that up is the avatar. And Jesus was one, Yogananda was one, Buddha was one, and there are others. But it's a very rare and exalted state.
Thank you for explaining that for us. When I did a third step prayer in the 12-step community, they told me to write my own third step prayer. And I go, I'm going to use Yogananda's in short. God, give me thyself so I may give thee to all. So that was pretty cool. You brought me down memory lane, so I really appreciate it. I usually ended it with the quote, but I'm going to end it with the reading from the Rays of One Light. And it's, can man see God? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it and your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. There is a saying in chapter 1 of the Gospel of St. John that would seem to respond with a definite no to the question, can man see God? The saying is, No man hath seen God at any time. The only begotten Son, which is the bosom of the Father, he hath declared him. Many great saints, however, claim to have seen God. If we ask then, can God be seen rather than can man see God? The answer is yes, else those saints lied, and the scriptures themselves lied. For Jesus also said, Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The point is, it is not man, this human body, these human eyes, that sees God. God can be seen only through spiritual vision, with the eyes of the soul. As the Bhagavad Gita puts it in the 11th chapter, Thou canst not see me with mortal eyes, therefore I now give thee sight divine. Behold my supreme power of yoga. With these words, Hari, the exalted Lord of yoga, revealed himself to Arjuna in his infinite form. Thanks for coming on, and I really appreciate it because you took me down memory lane.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's lovely to talk with someone so obviously full of love for God.
Yeah, thank you. Well, take care.
Just know we out here. Know we out here working in a major way. Had to speak on it just to make a break. Any given subject, know we make a way. Time to level up on the day-to-day. Know we out here working for the greater good. Expand your mind, broaden your lens the way you should. From the stars to the galaxy to speak on spirituality. Higher understanding for the neighborhood.